The Supreme Court. We're going to secure the Supreme Court with Brett Kavanaugh. He will be confirmed. I realize there's a lot of hype from the left saying we can block this, guys. That's what they're telling themselves so they don't curl up in the fetal position. But he's going to be a great Supreme Court justice. One of the great groups that has really taken the lead on this is the Judicial Crisis Network, also one of our sponsors this week. And I'd like to invite on stage now three great guys. Gary Marks, who is with the Judicial Crisis Network, Mario Diaz, who is the legal counsel for Concerned Women for America, and Matt McCoyak, the local all-star here, who is going to moderate this panel while I go take a break for a few minutes. Thank you all.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. All right. Those lights are bright, but we're glad to have this opportunity to talk about the Supreme Court. We obviously have a very consequential, probably 2 months ahead of us here, and we have great experts here to talk about the Supreme Court. Eric gave brief bios, but happy to introduce Mario Diaz, who's General Counsel for Concerned Women for America, one of our leading social conservative organizations nationally, appears in media and is an expert on constitutional law. And glad to have you here from Virginia. Thank you for coming to Austin for Resurgent Gathering. And my old friend Gary Marks is at Madison Strategies and is a senior advisor to the Judicial Crisis Network, which is sort of the lead conservative organization on the Supreme Court fight and has been very effective over the years. And Gary was executive director at Faith and Freedom Coalition and has advised Scott Walker and Marco Rubio and lots of other people in the conservative movement over the years. So great to have you in from Atlanta. Both of you, welcome to Austin. So why don't we maybe just give you each a few minutes just to kind of set the scene for us about the stakes, the battle that we're in here related to D.C. Circuit Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. Just take a few minutes each of you, and then we'll come back and talk about specific things. Mario.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and I want to thank Gary for putting on the panel and Eric for this wonderful conference. Always great to be in Texas with beautiful people and strong conservatives. I love it. Coming in from the swamp, you know, it's always refreshing to come here. I want to see if I can set the stage for you on where we are. We have a tremendous opportunity and we should not take it lightly. If you remember the nomination and confirmation of Justice Neil Gorsuch, which we celebrated and we worked so hard for, was the replacement of Justice Antonin Scalia. So you are basically replacing a strong constitutionalist with a strong constitutionalist. We were basically trying to preserve the status quo, if you will. If you remember, it was kind of an amazing thing how we got there, because as you heard from Selena on the panel before, Hillary was a shoo-in, she was going to win. She was going to get to nominate Scalia's replacement. And just with this issue being at the forefront, as Majority Leader McConnell putting it on the ballot and saying, let's let the American people make their voices heard with their vote. And then with then candidate Donald Trump putting out that list and just reassuring conservative of where he stood was an amazing turn of events that nobody could have predicted really at the time, and that gave us the amazing opportunity to put Justice Neil Gorsuch at the Supreme Court. But now you are getting to replace what has been termed by everybody the swing vote, right? Even though many media outlets want to portray Justice Kennedy as a conservative, the reality is that he did not hold a strong constitutionalist view, as we would call it. He would vacillate in his opinions and from what he would do, how he would approach each case. And it basically comes to these two philosophies that we have in the legal circles, right? We have a philosophy that says the Constitution is a living, breathing document that was written with the purpose that it would be like that it would change with time. And of course, the question that needs to follow such a philosophy is who gets to say what those changes are. The Constitution is clear that the people have a way to amend the Constitution and do any changes that they see fit. But in those judges who believe in this living, breathing Constitution have appointed themselves the guardians of the Constitution, and they decide then when a right has become so supported by the people that they should now read it into the Constitution. The other side of it, which is the constitutional side, we would say, is a philosophy that says, no, the Constitution says what it means and means what it says.
Yeah.
And then we want to, or the work of the judge is to ascertain what the meaning, what was the intent when it was written, what was the public understanding of the text, and from that you move along. And the same approach really to any law. If you get a statute, you go by the text of the statute. You heard Justice Neil Gorsuch talk about that during his confirmation. And the great news that we have is that we have a strong constitutionalist in Justice Brett Kavanaugh that is not in any way an unknown commodity for us, which has been a problem in the past. In the past, conservative or Republican appointees would look for somebody who, with a not so well-known judicial philosophy, so that they could get confirmed in a more amicable way. But in Justice or in Judge Kavanaugh, we have somebody who has a proven track record, over 300 written opinions, and he has been meticulous, he has been fair, he has been impartial, and these are the types of things that we as conservative want to strive for. Impartiality is a big word that maybe some people kind of scoff at, but it is a real issue. If you remember, President Barack Obama said he did not want that. He said, I want judges who are specifically empathetic, and that was the famous empathy standard, he said, empathetic towards specific groups, minorities and women and LGBT and all those things. So by design, he was looking for judges that were not impartial. And so this is a big issue that even though for most of us would be kind of a no-brainer, it is really something that is important for us to focus on, and it is the focus of Judge Kavanaugh, because he is a justice that will try to abide by the text of the Constitution. That's what you're going to see, and it might frustrate some of you. During his confirmation, during his hearing, I expect him to withhold prejudging cases. He's not going to commit, as many of us maybe would like, and many of my constituents, the people that I deal with, would like to know, how is he going to vote on this case or on that case, Roe v. Wade or something. But the reality is that a judge who understands his limited role and the judicial restraint he should embrace is not going to go there. And so I'll end with
Gary,
that.
your opening statement. That was great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Eric. This is great to be with all of you in the real America, outside the swamp. But we're going to be talking about a swampy battle. And for me, this is my 8th Supreme Court nomination fight, going back to 2005, when I was privileged to help found the Judicial Crisis Network. And we are in the middle of this fight because of what happened and how other judicial nominees were treated, like Judge Bork and Justice Thomas. We are in this fight to make sure they do not Bork Judge Kavanaugh, and we are witnessing hysterics like we do every one of these nomination fights, but I want to share with you a few of the local hysterics to this fight. And this compilation comes from my friend Ken Klukowski at Breitbart, and he put together a number of the recent ones. You may have heard Cory Booker recently had some things to say about people that support Judge Kavanaugh. Booker said, "We are walking through the valley of the shadow of death. You are either complicit in evil, or you are either contributing to the wrong, or you are fighting against it. So anyone who supports Judge Kavanaugh, you are complicit with evil." Some other liberal senators said, and this is from Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, "Judge Kavanaugh is your worst nightmare." Elizabeth Warren says, Judge Kavanaugh's nomination is a threat to people of color, to women, to workers, to the LGBTQ community, to people living in poverty, and on it goes. I'll end with two of my favorites from other senators. Senator Kamala Harris says, we're looking at the destruction of the Constitution of the United States, end quote. And finally, Jeff Merkley said on July 9th, this is a nominee who wants to pave the path to tyranny. So the histrionics never end from the left, but they've been particularly hysterical because they don't have a record that they feel they can fight. They are acting as if the previous 12 years do not even exist in terms of Judge Kavanaugh's record, a sterling record on the second highest court in the land. And they're really focused on one thing, and that's all the documents before that from his years in the Bush White House. And they want to focus on a giant fishing expedition, maybe try to relitigate the Bush years. And what is all this about? It's about time. Time and obstruction. They want to do whatever they can to slow down the results of the Trump presidency in terms of stellar judicial nominations from the lower court levels on up. They want to stop any more from happening than are happening, stop any more of this progress, and they're obstructing like never before. Some of you may have seen the movie Dunkirk recently, and it's one of my favorite movies in recent years. Christopher Nolan produced it, and if you know that movie, it's about the miracle at Dunkirk and rescuing the British and French troops from that beach. And in the movie, the battle and the conflict is not necessarily with the German forces that are closing on the troops at the beach. And Nolan's telling of the story, the battle is against time. The whole soundtrack of the movie, you hear a clock ticking, tick, 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 tick. And indeed, you don't even see any of the German forces' faces. You see them just a little bit at the very end because it's about a conflict with time. And we are facing the same thing. It's not so much about a battle with Minority Leader Schumer. It's a battle with the clock. And the same thing is being seen here in the Supreme Court battle as we've seen in the lower court battles. They're just trying to obstruct. They're trying to hope that maybe they could somehow get past this election and maybe somehow there's a Democratic majority and maybe somehow they can find some sort of trumped up scandal, no pun intended, to push a narrative and try to bork this nominee. But believe me, their playbook has not changed. It's the same as it was in 1987 as it is now. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to see from the miracle at Dunkirk, in a way, a miracle in the Supreme Court, because we were never supposed to have this day. We were never supposed to see a President Trump nominating replacements for Justice Scalia and Justice Kennedy. That was never supposed to happen, and we should all be excited that we live in this current reality that we get to have.
Absolutely. Well said. So I think that kind of sets the scene, and I think there's some specific areas where we can dig a little bit with the 15 minutes or so we have remaining. First, I want to ask you kind of about the state of play, and then I want to talk to you about the Ginsburg standard. You kind of alluded to it, but it certainly is something we're going to see on our television screens in September, late August, early September. Gary, there is a battle currently over document production. Democrats are asking for every document that Brett Kavanaugh's ever held in his hands. It's overbroad, clearly, but there are timing considerations, there are archive considerations. Anyway, his career is he served as associate counsel in the Bush White House and then served as staff secretary. And so it seems to me the issue is work product. When you're a staff secretary, it's not work product. When you are an assistant counsel, it is work product. Talk to everyone here and help them understand the stakes of this document fight and why it matters in terms of the timeline.
Yeah, so we're past the rollout phase and getting to know the judge, and now we're fully into the phase in the fight over document production, and that's really a fight over time. And the Democrats know that they have a chance to try to focus on these potentially 1 million+ documents that are in his record because he served in the White House during the Bush years. This was also during the years when this thing called email got really big. And in those years, a lot of people like to copy a lot of people on emails. And you might see an email that you were copied on, and it has nothing to do with you, but especially if you were in the job of staff secretary, you got copied on every single email that comes through the White House and every single major document, because your job was to be the staff secretary in those jobs and be the traffic cop and make sure the right information is getting to the president. So this is not a job where it required him to be a decision maker and a policy maker. He was a traffic cop. But this is a chance for Democrats to go on a fishing expedition, relitigate the Bush years, try to talk about the war on terror and privacy rights and any axe they wanted to grind with President George W. Bush. That's what it is about. They don't want to focus, as I said, on those 12 years of judicial record, because that's where you're going to see his philosophy. They want to look at a political job that he had and try to make hay out of, hey, this might be his political belief, as opposed to, we have 12 years to see his legal and judicial philosophy. So that's purely what it's about. You may have heard the National Archives is saying, well, it's going to take us a while to get those documents until into October. Well, there's also another body at work, and that's the George W. Bush Library, and they are producing those same documents along the way, releasing those in tranches, so those documents are going to be available quicker than the National Archives provides them. So Senator Grassley and Senator McConnell have given us every confidence, as they've led the way on the Gorsuch nomination and others, that they're going to get this done. They've said they're going to get this done in early fall. It may be early October, right when the Supreme Court is coming into session, but I believe it's going to be done, and he'll be ready to listen to cases and join the Supreme Court when they go into session on October 1.
Yeah, so we obviously have an intense 2-month period ahead of us. The month of August being document production, setting the confirmation hearing, proceeding with the confirmation hearing perhaps late August. I know we're going to talk about the timeline, but then the Senate debate potentially in September, so that it can wrap up by the end of the month before the first Monday in October when the fall term begins. Obviously, if you don't have that, you have a 4-4 court potentially on some issues, which would leave those rulings to the lower courts, which is probably not something we all want. But let's talk about the Ginsburg standard and dig in on that, because that is going to be something we're all going to see on our television screens when those confirmation hearings are happening. This goes back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it's effectively the idea that a Supreme Court nominee should be protected from being forced to answer how they will rule on a potential case in front of them. They can talk about past rulings, they can talk about judicial philosophy, but not about the future. Is that an appropriate standard, and why will that matter?
I think it is an appropriate standard, and of course, given the state of the judicial confirmation process, it's the appropriate one, just because, and this kind of relates to what Gary was talking about in terms of documents. The day that Kavanaugh was nominated, I don't know if you saw the pictures of a rally they had, that the other side had at the Supreme Court, and they had all of the possible nominees, their stop whoever it was on the floor, just laid out whatever the president said, stop him.
Yeah, stop, fill in the blank.
So so you've heard, you got to pass a bill to know what's in it. This is the equivalent of that. They opposed him, and now they're asking for documents to find out why they are opposing it or something. And this is what, unfortunately, this is something that is sobering for those of us who would like to get back to a process that is just and fair and tries to look at nominees based on their qualifications, is that the confirmation process has become a process that is about playing to the cameras, playing to your base. And this is why you heard it from Erick earlier. Judge Kavanaugh will get confirmed. They know it and we know it. But they must score political points. Their base is just screaming at them, screaming at Chuck Schumer to do something. You got to fight it. The record of the nominee really has no bearing on it.
Right.
And so when you have that type of questioning, then you have those senators of the Judiciary Committee not really probing to learn about the nominee, but to make him look bad and to score political points. See how I fought for your side. And so the fact that a nominee steps back and said, no, I'm not going to play those games, I think is appropriate given the environment.
So, minor sidebar here, but I think you all find it interesting. You know, you mentioned Bork, Gary, and the irony is not lost on me and probably not lost on people that are following this closely that because Bork was treated the way he was and not confirmed, it led to Anthony Kennedy being confirmed, who obviously now is opening up this seat for an originalist, textualist, you know, solid conservative on the court. There's a through line there that's pretty compelling if you really think about it. What is the dynamic up in the Senate? We know that when Gorsuch was nominated, that 3 Democrats voted in favor: Heitkamp of North Dakota, Manchin of West Virginia, and Joe Donnelly of Indiana. So the presumption is those 3 would be likely votes in favor again, but we could get a couple additional votes as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're in a good spot. There's been great momentum for Judge Kavanaugh already. Senator Rand Paul came out in support of him this last week.
There was some question about Rand.
Yes, there was. Yeah. He had some concerns on privacy issues. And before that, strong conservatives like Senator Ted Cruz and Mike Lee had supported him. So he's been meeting with Republicans, and the Republican caucus has been very united when it's come to judicial nominations. A lot of people don't know this, but Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska have voted 100% of the time for President Trump's judicial nominees.
Both voted for Gorsuch and both voted for Kavanaugh.
That's right.
Previously, when he was appointed to the D.C. Circuit.
So we have a strong record of support, and we have no reason to believe the Republican side is not going to be unified in support for Kavanaugh. And the question is what the red state Democrat senators will do. You know, we have the 3 that Matt mentioned. They came over, and I just want to share with you some polling results from those red states. In North Dakota, where Heidi Heitkamp is running for re-election, 60% of voters there say Judge Kavanaugh should be confirmed, only 22 against. In West Virginia, 55% say confirm, 30 against. And in Indiana, where Joe Donnelly is running for re-election, 52% say confirm, only 34 against. So they are swimming upstream if they are going to oppose Judge Kavanaugh. And indeed, they're the only 3 Democrats that have either met with Judge Kavanaugh or are scheduled to. And Manchin met with him this week for 2 hours, and Donnelly and Heitkamp will meet with him on the 15th. So at the moment, they're the 3 that we think are most likely to come over, and we'll have to see. They're in a real box, and they've got to fight their way through that political bind that they're in. But we have a lot of confidence that this is on a strong path, and that Judge Kavanaugh will do a great job in the hearings, despite a lot of the histrionics and the political posturing you're going to see during the hearings. And those will probably be after Labor Day. And
I presume that we would also look for the other potentially vulnerable Democrats to maybe come in the right direction. Tester of Montana, Bill Nelson of Florida, Doug Jones
in Missouri.
Yeah.
Judge Jones in Alabama, he's not up for re-election, but he's a brand new senator, and he didn't vote on Gorsuch, so we don't know where he stands. My group, we've been doing advertisements about Judge Kavanaugh in Alabama and those other 3 states, in addition to Washington, D.C. media market.
So I do want to talk about 2 other things sort of more broadly here. And one is, and let's kind of maybe try and move a little more quickly so we have time to get to some other subjects too. Donald Trump did a very interesting thing as a candidate. And he's really maybe changed the game as it relates to presidential candidates going forward by developing a list of finalists that he would consider for Supreme Court vacancies. He eventually expanded, I think it was 9, and then he expanded it to 20?
It's at 25 now.
25, right.
Minus Kavanaugh.
Minus Kavanaugh, sure, and minus Gorsuch now. So expanded it, but we'd never had a presidential candidate say, here's the list I'll choose from. Now, obviously, Trump was a unique candidate in that maybe some of the conservatives weren't sure what he would do on judges, and so it was in his interest to do it. But let me ask you this, Mario. Do you believe that Trump has sort of changed the way presidents talk, potential presidents, presidential candidates talk about Supreme Court nominees going forward? Because this has been a very effective device for him.
Yeah. I absolutely think so. And I have to say, in my time, and I have, 15 years working on nominations, I've never seen a president be so transparent with the American people in letting him know, even when he didn't have this political track record,
right,
by committing he not only put the list out there, but he said, I will choose from the list.
And then he did.
Yeah, and then followed through in that commitment. It's been remarkable to see, and I do think he changes at least for the conservative side, for the Republican side. I think there's going to be more scrutiny and more of an incentive to do it, because you're being, when you think about the issues we care about, a lot of the issues that we like where President Trump has taken action are issues that the next president will come and do the exact opposite.
Sure.
And by executive action, those are things that come and go, but the work of the judiciary, Neil Gorsuch is going to be there for 30 years.
Right.
It's going to go way beyond the time that President Trump gets to be there and affect policy. And the same thing, not only at the Supreme Court, but all those lower courts. I mean, President Trump has been absolutely excellent. You cannot give me another name of a senator or representative that would have done better. He has nominated 26, we have confirmed 26 appellate court judges, 24 appellate court judges, 26
others.
District court judges.
Yeah.
So that's 51 in just, his first 2
year
years.
and a half.
Yeah, year and a half. So he has been incredibly successful, and I think it has to do with that first instinct, and it was his instinct. This was a kind of an unknown for a bit that, and the left continues to say that this is people that, the Federalists chose or the Heritage chose. They just keep throwing names. And he has taken out, advisors, JCN and others, but it was his instinct to do this for the American people so that they could get to know him.
Yeah.
And I think it has paid off for him immensely, and we should see others.
You want to make a point on that?
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say, and we now see that there are members of that list who are moving on up. We had just this week a circuit court judge for the 12th Circuit get confirmed from the state of Georgia, Britt Grant. She was a Solicitor General there, and now she's moving on to the circuit court. She is one of the folks on that list.
Don Willett here in Texas.
Don Willett, and you're going to see them advance in their careers, and I would guess that future candidates for president would be looking at those same type of people in future years. So I tend to think this is probably institutionalized. I don't know how the Democrats will react, though. I'm not sure how that plays on their side if they would do a similar list.
So let's do two last subjects in the final 3 minutes we have here. The first is Trump's legacy on judges. Incredible in a year and a half to have 51 judges confirmed, 1 Supreme Court justice, 26 district court judges, 24 appellate court judges, record pace on the appellate level. Just for a second, talk about that legacy. And obviously, this is part of why the Senate is so important. I don't think we're going to lose the Senate, but if we were, that would stop.
So I'm the father of 3 children. I have a 15-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old daughter, and an 8-year-old son. When Judge Kavanaugh becomes Justice Kavanaugh, it's very possible he will be serving on the Supreme Court when my children have grandchildren. That's why I'm in this fight.
Yeah.
I think that's why all of us understand how important this issue and President Trump's legacy and Majority Leader McConnell and Chairman Grassley, their legacy on judges is going to be felt for our children and our children's children. There is nothing bigger. A president's term might be 4 years, but a Supreme Court member could be on there for 40.
Let's do one last topic in the last 2 minutes here, Mario, and I know you'll appreciate this. I do want to talk about Antonin Scalia just for a minute, because in so many ways his impact is still being felt. And there's no probably area where it's being more felt than on the idea of textualism and originalism becoming not just sort of ideas that are narrowly prescribed by jurists, but now it's broadly accepted that this is the way judges should be doing their jobs. Talk about his legacy.
It is an amazing thing we have seen during his lifetime, that this idea, this philosophy of addressing judicial opinions went from being kind of an idea in the corner to being the central idea where every law student today gets to take a look at what this philosophy is about. And it is about being faithful to the founding principles of our nation. When you think about the Constitution, a lot of people think that it is the Bill of Rights that protects our rights. But Scalia was clear, and he was absolutely right, that it is the frame of government, the structure of government that guards our liberties. Because when you have a king or a dictator, he can ignore the Bill of Rights. You don't have anything. But it is this balancing of power. And this is why it is important for a judge to understand that the people are entrusting them with a very delicate, powerful position. And they should take it with that sort of reverence and show their judicial restraint to know when something goes beyond the text of the Constitution, beyond his role, and it is more of a legislative power or the executive power.
It's interesting how Democrats view judges through outcomes, not through the law and through the Constitution. And Scalia has made that clear.
Yeah, when it comes to Justice Scalia's legacy, it's unbelievable. It's a cornerstone for the legal judicial movement. And I've never told anybody this before, and I'll just tell you guys that in this place, I want to say I fully embrace my textual orientation. All right? Just want to make that crystal clear for everyone. And I hope you guys will too. I'll leave it at that.
We appreciate the work you both do. I'll just say here, the next 2 months are going to be consequential as this fine jurist is being considered for the Supreme Court. He's sat on the D.C. Circuit Court, regularly called the second highest court in the land for 12 years, associate counsel in the White House counsel's office, staff secretary, one of the most sensitive jobs in government, worked on the independent counsel's office with Ken Starr, really just an outstanding, influential jurist, and also a former clerk to Anthony Kennedy. So quite a shrewd choice by President Trump. It's going to be an interesting battle for all conservatives for the next 2 months. Thank you all very much. Great conversation. Appreciate it. We'll be right back.